You are listening to the Navigating Adult ADHD podcast with your ADHD coach and expert, Zena. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to Navigating Adult ADHD podcast. I feel like I haven't talked to you in ages. I know you get an episode every week, but sometimes it just feels like it has been ages. And that's probably, to be fair, my time blindness. Because I tell you what, I struggle to estimate and understand how long things will take, including this podcast. So I have been using like a little timer and putting the amount of time I think it's going to take on there. Like you can kind of set the time, and yeah, it's pretty fascinating. Everything takes longer than I think. So time blindness is a whole other episode. But before we dive into what we're talking about today, I wanted to let you know that we just wrapped up launch week here at Navigating Adult ADHD HQ. And we welcomed so many incredible ADHDers into the membership, the Navigating Adult ADHD membership. So if you missed out this time around, doors will be opening again in June. All right, June of 2025. And we would love to help you thrive with ADHD. In other news, exciting news, I have just signed on to partner with ADHD New Zealand. So I will be hosting some educational webinars. They will be online through Zoom, and they'll be happening throughout the year. So the first ones are happening in Neurodiversity Celebration Week, which is the 17th to the 23rd of March. So I'm going to do one on understanding your ADHD and how to work with your ADHD brain. Okay, and that one's totally free. And then there will be another one, which is going to be a paid one. I'm not sure how much they charge. I know it's different for members, but you'll have to go to the website and check it out. And the next one, which is the paid one, is around understanding and managing dopamine for motivation. Okay, so if you're interested in those, remember that first one, that understanding and working with your brain, is totally free. You can head to adhd.org.nz to save your spot. I'd love to have you there. All right. So let's dive into today's topic. 5 less well-known ADHD traits that we probably share, right? Kicking off with number 1, which I definitely have. And if you've ever done one of those, like the strengths test? I know Martin Seligman has one. Martin Seligman? I don't know if I'm saying that right. But he's the positive psychology guy. And there's a 24 character strengths test that you can do. And you may have noticed, if you've done that a love of learning is a strength or a trait that you see. So a love of learning is one that many ADHDers share, right? We love to learn new things, right? But only things we want to learn about, things that interest us, right? And it can just be even having a conversation with somebody who's passionate about something that can be like fascinating to us, and we want to learn more about it, more about them, right? So maybe you have noticed this, because I definitely have, that you might become a walking encyclopedia about something that you are super passionate about, that you have like learned all about, whether it's like a new hobby or a new interest. So even ADHD might be one of those things for you, right? Learning about ADHD. So I get to coach and support and work with so many amazing ADHDers who also love to learn about ADHD, right? And that's me too. So often they know like all of these like incredible things about ADHD. They know a lot of stuff, but sometimes where we can struggle is when it comes to like applying what we have learned, right? Can you relate to that? Right? I know I sure can, and that's so much of what we do together actually inside the membership is apply what you learn specifically here on this podcast, right? So sometimes we can hyper-focus on the most random things, right? Maybe one week it's like the history of ancient Egypt, and then the next week it's like DIY woodworking, right? Like we can get like really interested in things and learn so much about them, and literally, like I said, become a walking encyclopedia of that thing. So the upside of this is that we're always growing, adapting, finding new ways, right, to improve our lives, for example, right, new fun things to do, right? However, like I said, sometimes the downside is that we can learn a lot of things and not necessarily apply what we learn, like gather all of the knowledge, but then have difficulty applying it. I wanted to share a bit of a story on this actually, because just yesterday I was like, oh, I think I did the thing I was trying not to do. And that was, so I hosted a training inside the membership, and the training was a masterclass, a 1-hour masterclass called Beating Procrastination, right? And the goal was to help people with overcoming procrastination, to know, identify when it's happening and then have tools to overcome it, right? To work through it, to basically procrastinate less, right? And I have been working on procrastination for a number of years in my own life and with the people I have been supporting. And so I have some incredible tools when it comes to this. However, I've got like multiple tools, not just one, right? And this 1-hour training yesterday, because I love learning about like ADHD brain and procrastination and all these things, right? Like I love this shit, right? So because I love it so much, I kind of went in and I gave them the fire hydrant. So what I mean by that is, if somebody's thirsty, it's more beneficial to give them a glass of water, right, than it is to, give them a fire hydrant and, point that at their face. Whereas yesterday, like I went in with like, here are like what I would recommend, like there's multiple tools here, right? Like I'm giving you a few to choose from. But I think that sometimes that can be very overwhelming when we do that. Instead of saying, here's one, start with this, right? And then building upon that. Yeah. And that comes back to this like love of learning, and also like wanting, like I love giving to people and being, generous and all of this sort of stuff. So yeah, little sneaky thing just to be mindful of that I noticed yesterday. All right. So number 2 on our ADHD traits is justice sensitivity. Woo! So us ADHDers, we have a strong sense of fairness. Okay, and we cannot stand when things feel unjust. You feel me? Right? This one can really rile me up. Right? So a couple of rather silly but funny stories, right? Just yesterday, right, we have got the 3 boys here and we're doing lunch boxes for the next day. And Mr. 13 now does his lunch box, and that's a whole nother story for another day, how that came about, right? But anyway, like he's old enough to do it, but I used to like love doing lunch boxes, used to really enjoy them. And so I was happy to do them. And anyway, he's making his lunch and he grabs a packet of 2-minute noodles out the cupboard and he's like, hey Dad, can I take these in my lunchbox? And he knows to ask his dad, not me, because I would be like, no. So he asks his dad. His dad's like, yeah, sure. And then I look at his dad and I go, okay, so if he can take 2-minute noodles, that means that his brothers can also have 2-minute noodles. And his dad's like, oh, no, that's not going to happen. And I was like, okay, but if you give him 2-minute noodles today, you've also, like, are you going to give him 2-minute noodles again next time? And how is it fair that if he can have them and his brothers can't? How does that work, right? Like a silly example, but like the justice in me was like, that ain't fair. Like, no way, right? And, okay, here's another story. We have got 2 cats who are like my whole world. I'm friggin' obsessed with cats, right? Crazy cat lady. I love my cats. And they love Temptations, right? The little cat treats. They're obsessed with them, right? Like all cats are obsessed with Temptations. And one of my cats knows where they live above the fridge, and he will hang around in the morning, like trying to get his treats. And sometimes he'll even like attack my feet when I go to like leave the kitchen, because he's like, look, bitch, you haven't given me my treats yet, right? And so I very rarely give them to him because it makes him attack me more, right? And other than that, he's pretty loving, but when he wants his treats, like he ain't not nice. So there were 2 days in a row where I just gave him his treats. I was like, you know what, it's just easier. I need to get upstairs. He looks like he's going to attack me. Here's your treats, right? Here's your little 4 Temptations. I literally rationed them out. 4 Temptations for you, right? But because I gave them to him, the next time I saw his brother by himself, I gave his brother his 4 Temptation treats, making it fair and equal, right? Like that is the lengths that I will go to when it comes to things being just, right? So you probably relate to the justice sensitivity and how that can rile you up. But I want to also highlight that this makes us great advocates and leaders, right? As well as change makers. right? Now, the challenge with this, of course, is that because we feel things so deeply, right? People with ADHD, we feel things more deeply than the average person, right? That injustice can really affect us and it can kind of consume us, right? Like I know that I can have it on my mind for a long time when something's like really rubbed me the wrong way and felt like really unjust. I can like have that on my mind, right? Yeah. So number 2, justice sensitivity. All right, let's go to 3. Number 3, and this kind of follows on from justice sensitivity, and that is not having the patience for people who don't take responsibility for their own mistakes. So if you think about it, those of us with ADHD, right, we have been told constantly to own up to our mistakes, right? Whether we just forgot something or, we were running late or we acted impulsively. Many of us grew up hearing things like, you just need to try harder, or you're making excuses again, right? Even when our struggles were due to executive function challenges, due to having a brain that's wired differently. We're not doing these things because we're lazy or we have negative intentions. No, right? But because we have had to take so much responsibility, right, for our own actions, our own behaviors throughout our lives, it can be kind of infuriating when other people refuse to do the same. You feel me? Like, have you ever worked with someone who has made a mistake, right? Like knowingly it's their mistake, but they refused to acknowledge it, to take responsibility and own it, right? Meanwhile, there's us ADHDers who have a tendency to over-apologise, right? Even when things are not our fault, right? So this isn't just about like frustration, right? But also, again, like that fairness comes into it, that whole justice sensitivity, right? Because we hold ourselves accountable and we often hold ourselves to quite a high standard, right? Sometimes too much of a high standard. So it can be really difficult to watch other people dodge that responsibility. Like I got to admit, I struggle with this one, right? Co-parenting 3 boys, because I don't know if it's just a kid thing, but taking responsibility is not a thing they want to do, right? It is always everyone else's fault, right? All right, I've got an example for you. And if you don't want to hear a poo story, like just like fast forward like maybe a minute and a half, okay? Yeah, now's the time. So one time, this just came to me. One of the boys had let's call it a poo-cident, a shit-cident, right? Where he somehow missed the toilet bowl with his number 2 and he got it on the floor. And I'm talking a log. Thankfully, like it was a log, right? But he missed the toilet bowl, managed to get his log on the floor, right? And this is in a morning, and I think it was like a Sunday morning or something, and I was in bed and all of the boys were up, my partner's up, so their dad's up, and their dad discovers it, and he's like, come here boys, like gets them all up to this bathroom, and he's like, who did this, right? And we established pretty quick that it's not Mr. 9 and it's not Mr. 13, right? So somebody's had an accident, which is okay, right? And I'm in bed listening to this, and the kid who's obviously had the accident is like, well, maybe it was Rocky or Sugar. These are our cats, right? So maybe it was the cats. Like, that is the length that he was going to not take responsibility for what was obviously not a cat accident. And honestly, it was just kind of so humorous. Nobody got in trouble. It was just very humorous. But that's the kind of lengths that kids will go to get out of taking responsibility. Like, they will literally blame a cat for something, right? But when we're talking about things like more serious things, right, where they're not taking responsibility, I can get really like rah about this. And like sometimes I just have to take myself away, right? Like, your dad's going to deal with this one, or me and your dad are going to go for a walk and we're going to talk about it, right? Which is always a really good thing to do. And then we will talk about, consequences of your actions or what have you, or taking responsibility, right? And I've got to admit, like, as a co-parent, trying to teach kids to take responsibility is a difficult thing to do, especially when it's something that like fires me up, right? So that one, I'm navigating that. But on the positive side of this, right, when we don't necessarily have the patience with people who won't take responsibility for their own actions and mistakes, the positive side of that is if this is you, right, like if you're like nodding along right now, you are likely quite self-aware, right, and willing to reflect and grow, right? So I think that that's a really good thing, and that's for sure me. I'm like, oh shit, yeah, that was me, my bad, right? Interesting one to think about. All right, number 4, over-committing to stuff and saying yes before thinking it through. Can you relate to that? Do you overcommit to things? Do you say yes before you've really thought it through? Because I for sure do, right? And here's the thing. So often when somebody says, oh my gosh, do you want to come along to this like weekend away and it's going to be so fun? It's like, oh my God, dopamine, enthusiasm, like exciting, yes. Right? Like our ADHD enthusiasm can kind of go next level and we just say yes before we consider things like, do I necessarily have the time? Am I going to have the energy for that? You know, is it a realistic thing for me to commit to that, or will I be overcommitting myself? Right? We just get excited and we commit to things that we genuinely want to do. And then we often realize, you know what? I've probably overbooked myself. Right? And it might not even be time-wise, like I might have the time for it, but mentally, do I have the capacity for that? Emotionally, do I have the capacity for that? Physically, am I going to have like the energy for that? Right? And this often happens because of time blindness, right? Like our time blindness definitely comes into this. Also rejection sensitivity, right? We don't want to miss out on things or, you know, be criticized for not necessarily doing things, but also impulsivity. Hello. Impulsivity definitely comes into this. And then also dopamine. Like we can get dopamine when someone else is excited about something, right? So just last week, actually, I found myself excitedly replying to an email offering to help with this local event that is coming up. So we've got a local event here, and I think it's called Startup Weekend, where the whole weekend is about like startup businesses coming together and like creating their ideas and then pitching it, sort of a thing, right? So it's like a mini Shark Tank. I've never watched Shark Tank. I don't know, maybe not. Anyway, they wanted some volunteers to help with them, you know, putting their pitches together and doing it. And I've done it before, and it was like a great event, like really fun, awesome, well run, all of this sort of thing. Great to be in the community and helping. So somebody had asked me if I was able to help again in a similar sort of a capacity. And I excitedly replied, and I was like, yes, I would love to help, da da da. And then I started realizing, you know what, with the amount I have on my plate right now, my current plate is quite full. Right? And although it would be a great thing to support and, you know I will enjoy it, I think it's going to come back and bite me in the ass quite literally, right? Like physically, mentally, emotionally, I don't think it would be a good thing to commit to on my Sunday, which is really my day of rest. And I've been very good at like using that day to deliberately rest, which is a whole nother episode coming, right? So again, like at the time I was like, yeah, I've done that before. It was a great event. I'd love to do it again. I don't have anything on that weekend. Yes, I'll just do it. Right. And then I started on reflection like, oh, I think I might have overcommitted and said yes a little too quickly here. So when we start kind of working with our capacity, which is something I'm really big on, like, do we have the capacity for this? Like being aware of like, how much do I have in the tank today? Right? Like I had 100% yesterday and I gave 100%, right? Like I had this cracker of a day where I got so much done. I was like on effing fire. But I don't have that every day, right? So today, for example, if I've got 30% and I give 30%, then I gave 100, okay? But the thing is, on a Sunday, I'm often kind of like resting, depleted, like I've had a full-on week. Right? And I want to sort of set myself up for the next week. So I know on a Sunday, often my energy is lower. Like the capacity in my tank is less. I'm probably going to wake up in the morning and feel like I've got 30% to give. Right? Do I want to spend it at this thing, doing this, you know, event, coming and going? Like I've got to drive back and forth and all of this. Right? So I've got a whole episode actually on capacity, which I definitely recommend you listen to because, you know, when we sort of listen to how much physical, mental, and emotional energy we have, we start to plan things differently. We start to say yes to things differently. This is one of the reasons why I almost always say no to anything in the evening. You want me to give a webinar in the evening? I'm sorry, I'm out. Right? I know myself well enough to know that I'm not going to be mentally and emotionally switched on for that. It's a no, right? So again, back to like number 4, overcommitting, saying yes to things before we think it through. The good side of this is like, it's because we're passionate. Like we're often fearless. Like we want to try new things, do new things, right? We have this kind of drive in us. However, we can get ourselves into a little bit of trouble with this, right? Like that's the downside. We've got to be mindful of that. One of the things that I have learned, and although I did not practice this last week with that email, right? But one of the things I've learned in person when somebody offers something is I'll often say, oh my God, that sounds amazing. Pencil me in and I'll come back to you to confirm, right? So it sounds like I'm all in, right? Which, I want to be all in, but I also know that I need time to think about it and check. Even if my calendar's free, that doesn't mean I'm a yes, right? Oh my God, that sounds amazing. Pencil me in and I'm going to come back to you and confirm, right? That kind of creates the balance for me to like demonstrate my excitement and get excited about it without being 100% all in yet, right? So again, this helps to kind of, pause, check in, give it some time before going all in. All right, number 5, the 5th ADHD trait that is probably a little less well known and common for those of us with ADHD. Am I like dragging it out? I so am, right? All right, number 5, making unexpected connections, right? Connecting dots that other people just can't connect, and then often being like, how can you not see that? How did you not come up with that? Like, this seems so obvious, right? So our ADHD brains see patterns and connections that other people miss, right? And I love this for us. I really do. Just yesterday, I was coaching a client and she was actually telling me about this conversation she'd had with somebody who was talking about like an issue and a problem that they had in their life, and how in her brain she could just so quickly and easily see the path to having solved it and achieving what this person wanted to get to. Like her brain just like lit up the connections at rapid speed. And I was like, yes, that's something our brains do. How cool is that? Right? And maybe you have noticed this with your intuition. You had that experience where you like walk into a room and you can just tell that like they've had an argument and things are frosty or something's not right in that room, right? And you can't necessarily explain it, but you just know something is off, right? That's because we see things, we observe things in the world through our 5 senses, right? Taste, touch, smell, see, I don't know, I can't remember the 5 of them, you know what they are, right? But we take on more through our 5 senses, which means, right, that we can observe things more than other people, than our neurotypical friends, which is quite a cool skill to be able to have, right? And then we can kind of piece things together without necessarily being able to explain it, but we can, right? And sometimes we might struggle with some like traditional, boring step-by-step logic, right? Maybe. But we can often excel at the creative problem solving and making those connections that other people can't, right? And this again it comes back to our nervous system is wired differently and therefore it works differently, right? Our nervous system is hypersensitive in many ways, right? And it works at lightning speed. Now, this is going to be like a silly example, but I'm going to give it anyway. But just the other day, my partner and I, we left home to go for a walk. It was about 6 a.m. in the morning and it was blackout, like dark outside, right? And so we're walking under the streetlights and my partner had something in his eye and he's like, oh my God, my eye is so itchy. And like we stopped at one point under a street lamp and he's like trying to like get this thing out of his eye. He's like, oh my God, it's not nice. It's really not good at all. He's like, I need some water to get it out. And as soon as he said that, I was like, okay, well, we're about to walk past the college. Why don't we just walk in and find one of their like water fountains? And he's like, oh my God, that's genius. So we didn't have to turn around and go all the way home. And I was like, to me, I was like, that just feels super obvious. Like we've taken the kids in there and as we've been like biking past, we've like gone in there for water before. I'm like, doesn't that just seem super obvious? But for his brain, right, his probably neurotypical brain, he was like, I would never have even thought of that. And I was like, really? But that's often what it's like, is it seems really obvious to us, but not necessarily to the people around us, right? When we're able to make those connections and come up with those solutions, right? Kind of cool, really. Like that ability to jump from A to Z so quickly and come up with creative solutions. I like that one. All right, my friends. So as we wrap up, right? Us ADHDers, we share so many traits, right? Core traits, right? And while we know that there are, lots of very well-known things that we do and experience, there are also some things like this that are less well-known, right? That do come with, some of them come with some kind of benefits, some cool things that we can do. And for that, I am grateful. Although I do want to acknowledge that some of them definitely do come with challenges, right? We don't want to scratch over that too, okay? So you are not alone, right? In the cool elements that you have, but also in the challenges that you experience, right? As a result of having a brain wired differently, right? In a world that just wasn't really made for us, okay? But at the same time, all of these traits are what make you you, right? And you are a unique and awesome human, okay? So which one of these do you resonate with the most? I would love to hear. Come and hang out. You can hang out in our Facebook group, right? You head over to the website, navigatingadultadhd.com, and you can join that for free. Or come and hang out on Instagram. Tell me, right? DM me. I respond to every single DM that I get. Sometimes the odd one will go into like the spam folder and I just forget to check it. But when I find it, I do reply. All right? But I'd love to hear, which one of these traits do you resonate with? And do you have a story? A story about that trait you can share. All right. Huge love, my friend. Take care. Have a beautiful week. I will speak to you soon. Hey friend, if you want some more help navigating and thriving with ADHD and some help applying everything that you're learning here on the podcast, then head over to our website, navigatingadultadhd.com.